Canton Townie sing this song, doo-da, doo-da. Canton corruption all day long, oh doo-da day. All right, so Turtle Boy did post on X that he had spoken with this juror, and I was waiting for actually a recorded interview of some sort, but this is
I
what
think
we
it's
got.
going to be a written interview, isn't it?
Yes. Excuse me. So this morning he conducted a 1-hour interview with a juror in the Karen Reid case. This juror was one of the 3 who changed his vote to guilty on manslaughter, then went back to not guilty. I'm interested to know how many of them that was. This juror is an EMT. Oh. And was more than willing to speak with me about topics that no juror has thus far discussed. For the first time, we now have insight into the deliberations. I will be paraphrasing some of the questions I asked the juror along with their answers. Yes, he comes up with some good questions. Who was the most convincing witness for the defense? The most convincing witnesses were the ARCA guys. Huh, there you go. We thought so too, because they were strong in their delivery and presentation. But the ARCA guys were unequivocal that John's inquiries didn't come from. Oh, sorry, I think that meant to be injuries. I'm doing a terrible job. John's
I
injuries
can't
didn't.
even see the writing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Is it
well, for me, it's really small, but
okay?
that's because I've got the chat on the side as well. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Whoa. Hang on. It's a little bit too big. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
The ARCA guys were unequivocal that John's injuries didn't come from a motor vehicle collision. Clearly, those who voted guilty did not find them convincing what went wrong. The group in general felt that defense was trying to derail us with them. Oh, what? See, and this is it. For me personally, Kat, I
Sorry,
don't know
the
how you
group in
feel.
general felt that the defense was trying to derail us with. Really?
Yep. And this is something that I think Bev got wrong. She said if we tell the jurors that these are FBI and about the FBI investigation, that would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Prejudicial.
Yeah.
That would be too prejudicial. But by not telling them who
Oh,
the
yes, I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
it ends up being more prejudicial, don't you think?
Well, I think because when the Commonwealth presents a case, right? When the state presents a case, it's
Right.
so
The judge has got to make decisions in the light most favorable to the
yes.
Commonwealth. We
So
have
that
well,
is the problem, and I think, from what I heard, they thought, could it have been the insurance company? Yeah, whether it was the insurance company. He says that next, doesn't he? And that's a logical inference that they took, isn't it? Because they said, didn't the defense say, "Oh, we didn't hire you, we didn't
yep,
pay for you, did we?"
that's
And they
right.
kept making that point, and maybe they didn't foresee, oh gosh, are they going to take that to mean the insurance company did?
And then when we read further down, this particular jury is saying also that the majority of them actually did think it was an insurance company
Yeah. He says whether it was an insurance company
or
or yeah.
Turtle Boy, or no offense, yourself.
Wow.
Did you know who I was? We did know because there was someone in the jury who knew about you, and we talked about it a little bit. There was information being told to us by family members. Why were family members talking to the jury
That's weird.
about what was going on with the media, for lack of better terms? Someone on the jury was telling us that you were in the courtroom and there were people who were talking about different angles. Holy there was way heaps going on
If
here
that
that
was
shouldn't be
if
going
that
on.
was yeah, if that was before jury deliberations, that would be juror misconduct, you would think.
I don't know. Like, whose family members are they saying? Is it their own family members? Or are they talking about the family members in the courtroom? So, wow,
There's information
scary.
being us by the family members about. Yeah, that sounds like juror misconduct, doesn't it? If they're talking to anybody outside the jury, outside their, that doesn't sound right, does it?
The jury guessed that possibly Turtle Boy paid for the ARCA experts, but no one suggested the feds. That
Wow.
Turtle Boy paid for them? What? Based on our charge, which was to follow the evidence, so we left it alone.
Sheesh.
So, because of that factor, that we didn't know who sponsored them because the defense utilized them, but the prosecution did not. Surprise, surprise. So it was confusing on whether or not they were there to derail us, and some of the jurors felt strongly about that. I felt that there must be some truth in why they're trying to present this information and why the judge would even allow them to testify if they weren't credible. Like, oh, come on, people, were you not using your brains? They were a heck of a lot more credible, no matter who hired them, than Trooper Dunning-Kruger. Was there a pressure to reach a verdict? There was a lot of pressure to come to a consensus. Well, of course there is. That's what they're there for. Why did you ultimately vote not guilty? Maybe we were willing to accept a lesser charge, but in the end, I switched back and thought about it and said not guilty because the individual who asked how to get to 34 Fairview was John O'Keefe. He was the one who called and texted Jen McCabe. He was the one who programmed it into his ways. He was the one who wanted to go out drinking. There is evidence that there was scratches on his arm, but the clear-cut delineation of what killed John was a blow to the back of the head and hypothermia. And because of those two things, it was not her. Well, that's a roundabout way of getting to it, but I guess they got to it,
Yeah,
eh?
they
How did the vote move on deliberations? The vote was 6-6 to 8-4 to 9-3, and then back to 8-4. So they must be talking about the second count, the one they weren't decided on.
one that with all the sub questions, the lesser included, right?
So wait, if they got to 6-6, that's
Either
every.
way, they were hung. Either way.
Yep, I'm following. So it was the second count. They were 6-6. Then they moved to 8-4, and then to 9-3, and then back to 8-4.
Yeah.
8 for guilty and 4 not. Is that what they're saying there?
That's what it sounded like, but they didn't end up submitting it, right?
Right.
So
How were they initially able to persuade you to guilty? There was an engineer in the group. Oh, yay. And the engineer and the foreman, also a medical person, both were. And they said, let's look solely at the evidence and also look at the idea that perhaps it could have been. And this is conjecture. So that's why I went back and I changed quickly on the second day of deliberations. The question was, did it seem like the car backing up caused enough idea that John enough injury, I guess, that John was perceived that he fell backwards, and he fell backwards because he perceived a threat. I get what they're saying, that yeah, and engineering wise that kind of made sense why there was no impact, that John did the tripping over himself because he thought he was going to get run over, is what they're saying.
yeah, I don't know how
Yeah,
they got to that.
I don't know how they got to that. And an engineer of all people, like, really? So that means they rejected Trooper Paul's theory. Speaking of Trooper Paul, who did you think were the least credible witnesses? Trooper Paul and Lucky. Are you serious? Lucky Loughran was the least credible? Yeah. Turtle Boy's reaction saves mine. Wait, what? Lucky? What? What? He
I can
didn't
see where they
report.
could get an inference of not knowing what to think of his because didn't they say that there was a
Well, we're
basketball
about
hoop
to
hit
read
or something?
We're about to read how they got to that inference. He didn't report that other piece of accident that occurred, but he remembered all the other details. What other piece of accident?
I think
Why
that
would
was the hoop, wasn't it?
Oh, the hoop? Yeah, I gotcha. Why would he not report that he got into an incident with the hoop, but he did report everything else? During the testimony, when he was presenting it to the jury, he did not give us the information. Well, I'm going to beg to differ. He didn't report either. He said he even gave the Alberts, he cut them some slack, didn't report them as well.
Yeah.
He forgot that whole piece of information, which I think would have been important. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not really following that, but that's what the juror said. Did you think it was odd that state police never attempted to speak with Lucky Loughran? We found it odd. The whole thing was odd. It was 6-6 because it seemed like there was so much information that was lost that could have been gleaned in the first few days of the case. Yay, we can agree on something there. And at the time, half of the group thought it was clear that there was a little bit of bias and it was not clear what was going on. Just a little bit of bias. Oh, a wee bit of bias.
What about
What about
Chloe?
what about Chloe? The jury did not know, and we were all told that Chloe was rehomed. So we thought that as the jury and wondered why didn't they present anything about Chloe. After the trial, I realised that rehomed was another word for euthanized. My understanding is that Chloe is no longer.
So who did
Or
they expect to present about Chloe?
obviously the prosecution, because they're the
Yeah.
ones who brought it out.
And all they said was that it was rehomed.
Yeah. And it's not until after the trial that they realised that rehomed meant euthanized. Just like rehoming their phones meant destroying them.
Wow.
Did the jury believe that John was bit by a dog? Because there was 2 doctors who said John was bitten by a dog. The jury believed there was reasonable doubt. That's why there were 6 people who had reasonable doubt. It was very clear on charge 1 and 3. Murder was decided on day 1. She did not have an intent to murder. Interesting.
Yeah.
How could they believe that if she went 24 miles per hour in reverse? Nobody can believe it. We believe that he wasn't hit.
What?
So they believe she
Then-
reversed and scared him and he tripped over and fell backwards. We
Uh,
believe he wasn't hit. Weird. This is not what I was expecting. And that's good because, like, you often
yeah.
are surprised by the way, because they're sitting in a different position
Oh
to
yeah.
us.
And the way they think is really valuable information for
And how much of the
trial
way
lawyers, you know?
how much of the way that they're computing it is impacted by having to sit there and listen to Lally drone on for 8 freaking weeks. Like, that would have done my brain in. I don't know how I would have handled it. I would have been taking Valium, I reckon. So you're believed he wasn't struck by a car and that he jumped out of the way and fell. The jury believed it wasn't intentional. Huh. They wanted they wanted to they wanted to convict her on the second charge, but that it wasn't intentional.
Yeah, but what I don't understand is where, the defense brought out that the keystrokes or the key impressions or whatever were all, the timing was all wrong on them. So it couldn't
Yes.
have meant that she had reversed at that particular spot. Or so where did that yeah. Hmm.
Well, bear in mind, we had time to think about that. Like when it was first said in court, I was struggling to keep up with it because Alan's like he's firing
Oh,
on all
key cycles.
cylinders. Turtle Boy asks, how could it not be intentional going that fast? The 6 believe it was an accidental hit. Believed he was struck at 24 miles per hour. Wow. accidental at 24 miles per hour. How could you believe it wasn't intentional going that fast? I don't know what the other jurors were thinking.
So, Trooper Paul, he thought that he hit his head on the curb, I think, and then flew into the air somehow, doing a pirouette and everything. And then he kind of changed that when, you know, because what did he do? Hit the back of his head, and then it that didn't make sense either. The physics didn't make sense, did it?
No. So Total Boy goes on, but you believe he wasn't hit. Correct. It was inconsistent too because we thought that there should have been more damage to the car. Well, that's smart. So you were persuaded because someone on the jury was an engineer and they had a convincing argument, and then you went back to not guilty because you changed your mind? I went home and thought about it, and I thought about, based on the evidence, what ultimately killed him, and that was a blow to the back of the head and hypothermia. Are you one of the jurors who reached out to the defense? I am not. I was thinking about reaching out to the group and saying we reach out to the judge as a group, not as individuals, so that the first and third count can be resolved, because we did want to sign that. The reason it ended up that way, the way we did it, is because there was two of us in the group who wanted to reach out to the judge and tell her that we were unanimous on counts 1 and 3. The foreman said, no, that's not our charge. We have to be unanimous on all 3. What?
Wow.
The foreman
You
was the
see,
one that
yeah,
got it wrong.
someone in my chat said something about this, and I said, if I spent that much time on a jury, I would want to sue the foreman because the court picked out the foreman, right, the judge,
Yeah,
and he didn't do his job. So I wasted all my time there. I just can't believe it. It was confusing. But there's a
it
double-edged sword to that too, because you like people should know that each charge is an individual. That's why you get the sheets, right? The verdict slips should be individual sheets. And that's a hint to know that they're counted that way. So it we don't necessarily always tell the jury that because we don't want to just say, oh well, if you can't figure everything out, then just come back with what you can. But I think it should have been asked before she dismissed, the case, before
she
she
should have
called a
polled us.
mistrial.
It was her job to poll the jury. So yeah, interesting, right? There were reports of bullying in the deliberation room. Do you feel the foreman was bullying? He was given the charge as being the foreman, and therefore we believe that he was the leader and knew what he was talking about. The letter to the judge regarding how we were going back were well written. I don't know if it would have changed things if we'd asked that question about consensus on 2 of the accounts. Yes, it would have changed everything.
See, because they didn't realize that each charge is an individual verdict slip. What I thought was the problem was when she would say, go ahead, like she didn't say sustained or overruled. I think that's where some of the problems I had was. I thought that was a bit biased, the way she'd say, yeah, go on. Or, the
Yeah,
way she said,
we'll let
right?
you have that. We'll let them have
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's what she said. We'll give you that one. To me, that's where
That
I
was
thought
where
the
the
problem
bias
was,
came out.
right? Yeah.
Right. There was a lot of pre-trial stuff where I was just getting worried. I was like, wow, she's a really strict judge. And then it was like, yeah, nah, she's an a-hole. And then when we got to
Yeah.
that point where she said no one can object aloud, they can object, but they can't object on the grounds. That was when I went, yeah, wait a minute. And then Andrea Burkhart, just as that came out, Andrea Burkhart did a stream explaining, I think she was over on Alita's channel over on Legal Bites
Okay.
explaining it.
Yeah.
But she basically said that by Judge Canoni ruling out the ability to verbalize the objection, the type of
Reason,
objection,
yeah.
that
The
she,
grounds, on the grounds, you object on the
right,
grounds of whatever.
they weren't allowed to verbalise the grounds. They're allowed to verbalise the objection, just not the grounds. And Andrea said that that's the judge covering the Commonwealth's ass, so that when it goes to appeal, none of those objections can be errors, basically. So
Yeah.
that was the point. That, and as you pointed out, you know, the fact that she couldn't just go sustained or whatever, that, and she had to use her bias. Oh, we'll let them have
Oh,
that
yeah.
one.
Linda Mitchell has a good comment. Yes. Yes. She said to Lally, do you want to object, Mr. Lally? Mr. Lally.
Oh my God, that made me so sick. And
Oh.
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, I can't just keep going on about Bev. Let's keep moving, keep moving here. She makes me so frustrated, that judge. So two of the jurors wanted to reach out to Judge Canoni and ask her if you could acquit on 2 charges and hang on a third, and the foreman said no. Yes, he said it needs to be 100% of the charges with a unanimous verdict. Well, he was wrong. So why didn't you reach out to the judge? Because only the foreman is allowed to reach out to the judge. The foreman is the only one who can write the notes. And it was only 2 of us who wanted to reach out. But since the foreman didn't, it was 10 to 2, and they agreed that we had to be unanimous, and no vote was passed to the judge. The fact that the judge has confused the entire freaking jury is testimony to her own impact on this. Do you not agree? She
Yeah, I
confused
mean,
them.
there was some, you know, issues with, I guess the defense, they did really try to clean up the verdict slips, right? And I think the judge she confused the jury with her jury instructions, because we didn't get to see what the written jury instructions were. So it was hard for me to compare what she said. But then she said, if what I say is not written on the instructions, go with what I say, right? So we knew that it didn't matter what it said on the written instructions,
Yeah,
right?
she
Because that's
was
what she said. She said, if it's different on the written instructions, go with what I say. So then I thought, okay, well, I don't really need to see the jury instructions, the written ones, because she had said that. And she did say, don't come to me until you've got a verdict, till you're unanimous on everything, right? That's what she said.
It just feels to me like she had the entire jury. Like, we know now that that isn't the case, that they could have come back to her and said, we're good with 1 and 3. We found a verdict on those 2.
Yeah.
But we're not good with the second one. We know that now, but nobody knew that then. And I'm surprised.
Oh, it makes me sick every time I think about it,
Well, no, I'm surprised that she didn't poll them. Like, I feel like it's her responsibility. I don't feel
Yeah.
like
You can't
somebody
poll a jury if there's no verdict, you can't poll them. That's in the rules. But the judge always has, uh,
the power
you
of discretion. Yeah.
yeah, she can just, but that's not normally the way it's done. But what she should have just asked them a simple question, and it was in their rules. Is there any other charges you do agree on before you say a mistrial?
Yeah.
And she just
Ask
didn't do
them some
that.
bloody questions.
And in
Yeah.
America, if you don't object to something the judge does, right, or the other side does, then it's like you're saying, well, I agree, right? So because she didn't do something, even if you don't, does that make sense to everybody? So if you don't object, that means you're agreeing. So it's like, you know,
Right. But that's afterwards. It was her job to poll them. It wasn't their job to object because she didn't poll them.
no,
It
no,
was
no, the
her
defense,
job. Her
yeah.
job is to poll the jury. Defense can't poll the jury.
But all the
Prosecution
time,
can't poll
yeah.
the jury. She has to
Well,
poll the jury.
you can ask the
It's all,
judge,
the
defense
horse
and
is already bolted by the time she's going, oh, well, you didn't object.
yeah,
It's already over by then.
in a few minutes. But Yeah, so sometimes judges don't make the right decisions, right? You have to explain to them, "Oh, I don't think you can make that decision." So, we don't say objection in England. We say, "Excuse me, Your Honor, I think you've got to be aware of this." So we say it a little bit differently. I've had a few judges that have tried to make decisions and legally they can't do it, right? So you do have to say something to the court, because if you don't say it at the time, then it's like you're accepting it, right?
Yeah, but I still feel like she misled the jury. I mean, they're telling us that they were misled from the beginning. She misled the
Yeah,
jury. And Alan Jackson did jump up and down about the way she was presenting those forms to the jury. He did
yeah,
have a big say about that.
he did.
But she ignored him, and her compromise was, "Well, we'll just stick an extra box on there." That was her compromise. That wasn't he suggested it and then agreed to it. It was she said, "I don't agree with you, but to shut you up, I'm gonna put a box on there." That
Yeah,
was
exactly.
how that ended, and then, straight after all of that, when the judge gets the jury note, she needs to say, "Are you hung on one or all?" That's her
Yeah.
job. That is not
Well,
an
yeah. She usually
objective.
says, "Is there any charges you can agree on?" That's
Right.
normally what they
So
say.
that's all prior to where she's flipping it back on them saying, "Well, you didn't object." I get the "you didn't object" part, and I wish they had of, and I understand that, but the
But
stuff
do you
that
know
went
what's
up
funny?
here.
If they would have left it the way the judge originally had it, and because there was nothing to fill in if she was guilty, right? Not No, the way it was originally, there was not a box to say not guilty, right? So let's say it would have left it like that and they didn't fill it in. So does that mean she would have been not guilty? Like, that's bizarre.
Right.
Are you
Oh
following my
god,
thinking?
yeah, that just twigged. Oh my god, you're right. If that wasn't there, then
It
this would
originally, because originally that's my understanding, wasn't it? That the not guilty
yeah.
wasn't there. So if it would have stayed like that and the jury did nothing, and they would have just said, "Well, you've got to hand back your jury slips," and because they didn't fill in anything, right?
Mhm. Well, the foreman not filling out the ones that they agreed on, like we all agreed that one, so it should have been ticked. And then that last one, yep, we all agreed on that one, that should have been ticked. And then they would have handed those in showing that the middle charge was not agreed on. So
Yeah,
I feel like the foreman was led up the garden path about what had to be done, and then everyone just went with him, and Bev was the one that screwed all that up to start with. So anyway,
yeah.
let's go on. We'll be here for freaking years. I don't know how long this is. He usually sticks with 20 questions. So, do you feel like the guilty voters were more persuasive? Once deliberations began, there were jurors who didn't want to deliberate because they had made the decision already for guilty.
Hmm.
Wow. How did you feel about Brian Albert, Colin Albert, and Jen McCabe coming in on the last day of court? It was intimidating. Yeah, the other jurors have said that as well. Why are they there for? Why are they here? I get that they have a vested interest in it, but it was not a comfortable feeling. The majority of us were not comfortable seeing them there. So, was there more than one of you that was intimidated by them? I know for a fact that there was another juror who felt intimidated. We brought it up as a group as we were deliberating. A couple of people didn't notice them, but people who did notice said it was uncomfortable. Did you find Jennifer McCabe believable? It seemed to me it was rehearsed. I get it, you have to review your material before, but it seemed like they were all rehearsed or coached.
Hmm.
I agree with that. Do you believe John went inside the house based on the testimony you heard? I'm not sure. I think he might have made it in the house, but what happened after that, I don't know. There was some of us in the room that believed there was doubt about whether or not he made it in the house and whether or not there were interactions in the house. Damn it, the doubt was supposed to be about whether Karen killed him.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's another thing the defense can do better next time,
Yeah,
is to
make it
explain
more
to
clear
the jury,
what it is they're deliberating on.
yeah, what a reasonable doubt means, right? But I think the judge gave those instructions on reasonable doubt really well. So I think and plus they only had an hour in
That's
closing. I mean, that's terrible. Oh
that's
my
the
God.
only thing that she read verbatim from the
Yeah.
Massachusetts,
And
recommended reading.
yeah,
That's all she read verbatim was
and
that bit.
yeah, and it was very clear. If you're in doubt, the doubt goes to the defense, right? So that was very clear. But the defense only had an hour in closing, so I thought their closing was brilliant, but it's not evidence, is it? It's
Really. It's just
argument.
argument.
Yeah.
That means that the people who voted guilty on manslaughter believe beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not go inside the house, which means they believe the McAlberts. Okay, I don't know if he's actually saying McAlberts to them. Correct. They believe the McAlberts. No way. Have you read about the case afterwards? Afterwards, I have done a little bit of research, but not as much as people are thinking.
And this is why it's probably something the judge didn't want to do. Like I know I'm giving both sides of the argument just so that people can, you
That's
know,
okay. You
uh,
can give both
you know,
sides.
but be sure I didn't think Karen. I don't
We're
think
still
that
gonna be
the evidence is
responsible
there
with
that
her.
Karen didn't get him. Yeah. So by the once everybody's left and does research, they could have different opinions, right? And that could influence how they're speaking now, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. If you had known about the federal investigation, would that change your opinion? Knowing the ARCA guys were hired by the FBI, that would have changed a lot. It's exactly what I said. If it was told to us that they were part of a separate investigation, that's all they needed to say without tainting any information. But I think even the jurors would have looked at that differently. One of the major pivotal points was the engineer in the group said the ARCA guys did not give us any of their data. They presented the information but didn't give us any of the parameters that they set up as far as engineering controls and any kind of specific data. The engineer, based on his experiences to us, said that these were not credible witnesses. Wow. The
Wow, that's
majority
amazing.
the majority of us probably would have changed our vote if we knew that information. And I agree. They made it more prejudicial doing it the way that Bev said decided to do it. Have you ever interacted with John Fanning? No, the state police would be there in the parking lot when we finished, but we didn't speak to any of them. Well, that's a relief. Was there ever any contention based on differences in notes? The group wanted to look at the CERT notes. The CERT didn't have any notes. Why did you ask for the CERT team report? There was this fear that some of the pieces of the red tail light were planted. The point of our contention was to see what time the first CERT team individuals were arriving and if there was time to take pieces of tail light and put it on the grass prior to the state police coming in. Yes! Good to see they were thinking. Was the jury aware that at 7 a.m. the Canton police didn't find any pieces of tail light or a shoe? How did jurors think that tail light got there when the state police searched 12 hours later? Good question, Turtle Boy. Some people were looking at it and saying, we're going to ignore those pieces of information. For what?
What?
Because it seems like it's very convincing the other data they had. Oh my God,
But
what?
didn't they ask for that? They asked for that report, which there wasn't a report. But didn't they ask? That was one of their first questions. Can we see the report of the investigators on the property looking for pieces? Isn't that what they wanted?
Some people were saying it had to be there, but Canton police missed it. They believed it was more likely than not that it had to be there because she was guilty.
Wow. It's
So,
like I'm in a different zone when I hear this. I think, wow, are we watching the same
no.
trial?
So they believe she was guilty and worked backwards from there and said Canton police must have missed it. That's my disbelief. I don't know that Turtle Boy asked it that way, but that's the way I'm asking it.
Yeah. Oh, here's a sound. Sound is gone.
You're
You
going to
hear-
blow things everywhere. So you could maybe argue that some of the small shards of plastic would have been blown around to other spots on the lawn. So the
Yeah.
jurors
Bill's
believe that
Western
the
Mass
Kent
agrees.
police
Thank you.
are completely incompetent, but the state police are very good and found 45 pieces of taillight under a foot of snow that CPD missed. Correct.
And one was as big as a salad plate, remember? I was like,
No,
wow. Wow.
that wasn't even part of a taillight. I don't even know what the hell that was. It wasn't part of a taillight. Did Karen Reid's demeanor turn jurors off? I think it was her demeanor and facial expressions at certain point during the trial. She made certain facial expressions during certain witness testimony. Some of the jurors looked at that in a particular way. How the hell do you want her face to look when people are sitting there blatantly lying on the stand about her? Like,
Yeah.
what's your face meant to be? I know what mine's going to be. Mine's going to be like, I'm going to be snarly like she was. That's me, of course. I don't know. How would you be, Carol?
Her facial expressions could have been from a medical condition as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so she could be grimacing at some stages because she's in pain. There was days there where I saw she had bags in her eyes. She was exhausted some days there. Did anyone pick up on Ryan Nagel mentioning speaking with the feds? I wrote that down in my notes, but I don't know if others did. Interesting. Did the three holdouts for not guilty make it clear that they could not be persuaded? So it was three holdouts for not guilty. I thought it was three for guilty. It's three for not. They were very strong about it and wouldn't budge. Did you guys talk about any of this before deliberations? No, during deliberations is when information unfolded during the groups. The manslaughter count is what took us a long time. We looked at the tail light, opened up all the packages, looked at video footage to see if there was damage to the tail light prior to her getting back, and why there was no footage of her getting back to John O'Keefe's house. That's what we wanted to know. Did jurors think she deleted it? I don't think she deleted it, but I wonder if it was lost during the investigation because it probably wasn't saved on Ring. It would have been better if Buchanan followed up with Ring to make sure there was footage showing what time she got back because we don't know what time she got back. Well,
What? We do because of the text messages she was saying
I'm,
and when she connected to the Wi-Fi. Yeah. Oh,
right.
there it is.
I'm going to say the same thing. Well, we do because Nicholas Guarino said she connected to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. Which is also strange because it should have created video footage of her parking.
Yeah.
John's cell phone data shows him going up and down three flights of stairs. Guarino said this could have been caused by driving on a hill and moving the phone around. Did that ever come up in discussion? I like that he's asking about that because he actually went and tested that at the actual street that
Yeah, I saw
Guarino.
that. Yeah.
We never looked at that. The only thing we looked at was whether or not John ultimately arrived at 34 Fairview. So we looked at the fact that he did arrive, but we didn't take into account whether or not there was any validity to the Apple Health data going up and down three flights of stairs. What?
Mhm.
Oh my God. That to me, that was like critical evidence that
Yeah.
he was still moving, like in the Sandra Birchmore case, that she was still moving. Oh, I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
critical evidence, isn't it? Did
Well,
jurors judge
yeah.
Karen Reid because she drove drunk? The 6 who were guilty had very strong opinions regarding operating a vehicle under the influence and the drinking habits of the parties involved. Well, I'm glad there's a plural there because that's a point that I just recently made. It was absolutely nobody who was behind the wheel that night that was freaking sober.
Yeah.
I personally think Karen was, but that's because I sat there and counted her drinks. But anyway, the parties involved, not just Karen. One of the things we commented on was when John switched from drinking beer to hard alcohol in a glass. So, why did he switch? Now, with that being said, these people must be experienced drinkers. Brian Higgins said he was going to go home and have another drink. So, we thought these people are all professional with their consumption of alcohol, professionals. Professional drinkers.
What?
I'll let them have that.
I just thought Karen Reed wouldn't. Imagine your boyfriend is a police officer, a serving police officer. Why would he let somebody drive if they were?
Right, because he thought she was the only one who was going to stay. There was a theme with the Bat Dial trial, but nobody took it into account or believe it had any sort of credibility about whether or not it created reasonable doubt. The minority had doubts. To some, it was just a diversion tactic to create confusion.
Yeah.
The foreman wrote in an affidavit. I like how he slips that in. That protesters could be heard outside during deliberations. Was that true? We only heard them during lunch or when Karen's defense attorneys were walking out.
Oh my God.
So that blows their theory that, the protests outside influenced the jurors. Beverly Canoni did not bring jurors back to confirm the 12-0 acquittal on murder. Is there any discussion amongst jurors to come together and make a statement as a group about how you acquitted her of murder now that she's facing another trial for murder? I have not texted the group. I was hoping the foreman would approach the group. I think it's our duty to put out a unified front. No one has suggested coming out publicly, but my feeling is that in order to do our civic duty, I want to reach out to them as a group and say that I think we should all approach and make a statement that we found her not guilty on count 1 and 3. I thought it was going to resolve. I thought Judge Canoni is going to change her mind here. I wonder legally if she can't, but if we did it as a unified front, as a united front, then she
Mhm.
could do something. Well, that's the first smart thing I heard this juror say, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. We all thought Judge Canoni didn't really have much choice but to hear you guys out.
Yeah.
Do you believe that the photo
Oh, sound gone.
couldn't have hit him with a car because it's physically impossible instead of blaming the McAlberts? Would that have been a more effective defense? I believe it would have been the most effective defense if they'd just gone with the facts of the case and not created all these other pieces, which I get it, it's great for reasonable doubt, but clearly did not create a case for those individuals who did not create a reasonable doubt. Right.